If your enemies had the power to shape your desires and your fears, to mold your hopes and dreams, to define your very understanding of good and evil, surely they would use that power for their own gain. Over the past century, the hostile faction in control of our cultural institutions has used the art of illusion to remake our moral order and reshape our thoughts and behaviors to conform to their will. At the center of this transformation is the subversion of the very concept of heroism itself, orchestrated through the creation of new heroic archetypes, false role models designed to corrupt us and lead us astray. Walt Kowalski, the protagonist of the critically acclaimed 2008 drama Gran Torino, is one such false role model. Following his wife's death, Walt finds himself living alone in the Detroit suburb of Highland Park, a formerly white community turned multicultural ghetto, now plagued by gang wars and inter-ethnic conflict. Alienated from his own ungrateful children, and concealing terminal lung cancer from the people around him, Walt tries to live out his final years in peace. Hollywood's archetypal, cranky old white man, Walt is at first presented as inflexible, intolerant, and bigoted. When Walt catches the young son of his Asian neighbors, Tao Vanglor, attempting to steal his prized Ford Torino in a gang initiation, his prejudices seem to be vindicated. However, he is eventually swayed by their efforts to make restitution, and he gradually comes to befriend the immigrant Vanglor family. Learning to overcome his prejudices, Walt grows to appreciate their foreign ways, and sees that they compare favorably to his own kin. He even forms a bond with Tao, becoming his mentor and father figure. When Tao is attacked and his sister Sue sexually assaulted by a street gang, Walt decides to seek justice on their behalf. Confessing to the young man his guilt over killing a surrendering enemy soldier during the Korean War, Walt gifts Tao his Silver Star Medal, locks him in his basement to keep him from risking his own life for vengeance, and goes to confront the gang in his stead. Berating the gang members for their crimes as a crowd of onlookers gathers around, Walt reaches into his jacket as if to draw a gun, and they open fire, killing him on the spot. In his hand, they find a cigarette lighter. Walt, unarmed, sacrificed himself for the Vanglor family. The gang members will go to prison for killing an unarmed man. After Walt's funeral, his last will and testament is read. He leaves his most treasured possession, his Ford Gran Torino, to Tao. His own family, he leaves nothing. The film ends as Tao drives the titular Ford Torino down Detroit's Jefferson Avenue. It does not take much reflection to grasp the true subtext of the story. Walt is a symbol of white America. The Vanglors are the non-white immigrants who are displacing American whites, and Walt's Ford Gran Torino is the material and spiritual legacy of Western civilization. The film is a moral fable, and Walt Kowalski is intended as a model of virtue for the white audience, a heroic exemplar for them to imitate. The message of Gran Torino, therefore, is simple. White people have a moral duty to sacrifice themselves for the non-white immigrants who are replacing them, and to gift the civilizational birthright owed to their own children to those immigrants instead. It is an incitement to white racial suicide, masquerading as a story of heroism and redemption. But Gran Torino is no isolated example. The same archetypal narratives have played out for decades on screens across the world, reshaping the minds of millions of people. Through the manipulation of images and the gradual, deliberate fostering of a number of anti-white tropes and memes, Hollywood has meticulously crafted an anti-white narrative that has, over the past century, hijacked almost the totality of Western civilization, as well as the hearts and minds of most of its members. Inside this narrative, ethnic Europeans are framed as the villains of history, only able to play the hero through redemptive self-annihilation. Just a few notable examples should suffice. In Roland Jouffe's 1986 historical epic, The Mission, two Spanish Catholic priests turn against their own people to fight on behalf of a foreign tribe, dying as martyrs for their cause. In the 2006 science fiction film, Children of Men, the white protagonist sacrifices his life to protect the unborn child of an African immigrant. In the 2017 superhero film, Logan, the titular hero dies a self-sacrificial death defending border crossers. In the 2019 hit, Knives Out, a wealthy white author kills himself and disinherits his own children from his will, instead giving his family fortune to a Hispanic immigrant. These recurring themes and tropes are not the product of blind coincidence, but the manifestation of the deliberate will of the media controllers and their rationally constructed, systematic campaign to weaken white racial bonds and undermine Western culture. Utilizing their understanding of the imitative nature of the human animal, they advertise ideas and behaviors using the same methods they employ to advertise products, subliminally associating their subversive ideology and the behaviors they seek to condition into the captive audience with moral righteousness, with romantic success and popular adoration, with attractiveness and desirability. Intentionally destructive lies are placed in the mouth of the handsome, heroic protagonist, while hard yet noble truths are espoused by crazed villains. The neurotic, self-loathing loser gets the girl and wins the day. Passivity is enough to defeat, even redeem, evil. Strength is punished, weakness is rewarded. Through repeated exposure, these ideas, deliberately calculated to undermine white racial interests, are absorbed and internalized by the white audience, reshaping their thoughts and behaviors in accord with the dominating will of the media masters. Providing the passive viewing audience with false models for imitation, these culture distorters, fully conscious of their destructive intent, have redefined our conception of what it means to be a hero and our very understanding of the words good and evil. Traitors are heralded as selfless and noble, their treason against their own people framed as a higher loyalty to humanity. Self-sacrifice for the outsider is presented as the ultimate form of heroism, the path to redemption and even salvation. As a result of this century-long psychological warfare campaign, the white man now lives inside a story authored by those who hate him and seek his destruction, viewing himself and his world through the distorted lens that they have so meticulously crafted. We judge ourselves through their hateful eyes, according to the moral code they have imposed upon us, inside which we are good only when we serve their cause, and bad when we serve our own. We are conditioned to feel guilty every time we take a stand for ourselves, and virtuous only in self-debasement and self-destruction. Through this, our values are completely inverted. We are manipulated into feeling shame when we should feel pride, and pride when we should feel shame. We are trained to treat the outsider with complete trust and confidence, while treating our own with suspicion and contempt. We are conditioned to see victory as defeat, and defeat as victory, to see all that will make us strong as morally evil, and all that will render us weak as morally good. This unnatural moral order was built to harm us. Its creators need our people in a state of weakness and passivity so that we cannot oppose their designs. They want nothing more than for us to willingly lay down our lives without fighting, because they see us as the enemy. For they understand well Sun Tzu's famous dictum that, quote, "Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting." This is why Walt Kowalski sacrificed himself for an immigrant family, not because it was the right thing to do, but because it is what the people who control Hollywood want us to do, and they know that many of us, deceived by the power of their propaganda, will follow Walt's example. Through the use of these spiritual weapons, modern Western man's resistance has been broken. His spirit has been conquered, and yet he is none the wiser. He thinks himself an autonomous agent, a free man simply acting in accord with good morals and good sense, when in truth he is nothing but a slave to his enemies. It is owing to this state of spiritual subjugation that the modern white man can only feel virtuous when he fights on behalf of the racial outsider, and can scarcely even imagine fighting for his own cause. The very thought is forbidden, heretical. It is why modern white people think they are simply doing the right thing when they welcome foreign hordes into their ethnic homelands, or when they campaign for their own racial and cultural overthrow. They are merely reading from the script that has been written for them, playing their assigned part, unaware that it was authored by those who seek their destruction. The self-effacing modern white man earnestly believes that, in sacrificing himself for the benefit of those who hate him, he is just being a good person. He never stops to consider that he may unwittingly be doing the bidding of evil men. After all, he is only imitating what Walt Kowalski and 1,000 other Hollywood heroes did, to great acclaim. And weren't they good men? Weren't they heroic? Didn't the world cheer for them? It is time for us to reckon with this revelation, that the mythology of the modern age is corrupted from root to branch. The stories that have shaped who we are were written to deceive us. The men they presented as heroic exemplars to be imitated were false role models leading us to our destruction, Pied Pipers of the silver screen. The villains we have been trained to hate were so often merely the kind of men who might threaten the plans of our enemies. What they championed as redemptive self-sacrifice was merely craven surrender, suicide. The better world they coached us to fight for was a world without us in it. The passivity they told us would overcome evil only ensured its triumph. We have all drunk deep from this poisoned well. Lies surround and entangle us, and when we try to free ourselves from them, we find yet more lies. And yet, with the passage of time, many of us are learning to see through their illusions. We readily identify and expose their tropes, memes, and metaphors. We grasp the true destructive intent behind their narratives and decode their esoteric language. And armed with this knowledge, we are inoculated against their propaganda. Their magic is unmasked as a set of simple, repetitive tricks. No longer will we be duped into emulating the false role models they have created, who fight and die for their cause. We will cast off the story that our enemies have imposed upon us, wherein we can only choose between villainy or self-sacrificial death in the false binary they have constructed. We will author our own story, with ourselves as the hero, where our struggles and our trials will once again have meaning. It will be a story in which those who fight for our cause are the heroes, and those who fight against us are the villains, not the misunderstood victims of our own sins. A story in which our historical greatness is a cause for pride and celebration, not crushing shame and guilt. A story that ends with our triumph, not with our defeat and death. We will no longer allow ourselves to be judged according to the moral code of our enemies. We will no longer play the part they have written for us in a tale that ends with their victory and our defeat. We will write our own story, and it will set us free.